All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. My name is Dave. I am the Real Music Observer, observing real music in real time for real people just like you, me. And we've got a special guest on the program today. I am very honored. In fact, I can't even believe he's with me here. The one and only Graeham Goble from the original band that you may know as LRB, or as we try to say it, I used to say it on the radio, and the two words "little" and "river" they don't
Like
they don't flow. As a DJ, it's a little river. You just but Graeham Goble, one of the original and founding members of the Little River Band. Welcome, Graham. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Dave. Pleasure.
All right. First question I'm going to ask you. All right, and we'll probably go in different directions here, but you started in music when? What was like the first band that you were in? What can you? You're not embarrassed to tell us what year you
I,
started?
I'm I'm 74 this year, so I'm in May, my birthday. So I'm 73 now. I started writing songs when I was 11.
Oh
I
my
lived in
gosh.
Adelaide in South Australia, and I'm almost. I'm not really like I'm not a rock person. I was in a rock band, but
Mhm.
I'm really a songwriter, and pretty much from all my teen years, I lived in my bedroom writing songs. That's what I did. I was just constantly there, and starting to get through my teenage years with my songwriting. That was my companion then, and it's still my companion today. Songwriting. Yeah.
Yes, and that's a great lead in. Here in the United States, I often complain because radio stations, especially if they play music from 40, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they begin to start to, they cull down the list where you used to hear songs on the radio, very familiar songs, and then some genius upstairs at the headquarters says, no, nobody likes that anymore. They do some focus testing, as I like to call it. Um, One thing that you have going for you is you have two songs, probably more, because every time I look at a songwriting credit, your name is on it. Um, but the song my wife just melts every time she hears it is Lady. All right.
Well,
And then Reminiscing, which I think the BMI, all of that stuff, that I mean, those are getting like 5 million plays a year. And I think climbing in some cases. I don't know all the stats, but I did a little bit of research. And obviously, you've got a number of other songs that are on the radio here in the States.
Well,
Um,
Dave, it's not 5 million plays a year. It's Reminiscing's reached 5 million plays on commercial radio in
okay.
America in total.
All right.
Ladies reached 4 million plays, and the other big ones are the other guy, Take It Easy on Me, and the Night Owls have each had 1 million plays on US radio. So they're the five, if you like, American top tens that I've written
Mhm.
that continue to get a lot of airplay today in the States.
All right, I went a little overboard with the number of plays, but I think the audience, my audience here, I know loves this music. You started in this band in 1975, correct? And you actually, I think the first song that was on FM radio was a tune called "It's a Long Way There,"
Yeah.
and I hadn't heard that song in a while, and then I'd heard it later on, thinking, yeah, they used to play that on FM stations. It wasn't an AM radio song because it was like 8 minutes long. So
There was an AM cut on for about three and a half minutes that helped us. That really was our first single in America. It broke out of St. Louis and Jacksonville, Florida, were the two places that it broke out of. But that was our first release in America in '76. Yeah.
yeah, and you wrote that song as well, correct?
Yep. Well, I wrote it in 1973, and Beebe and Derek and I used to play It's a Long Way There in Mississippi, which was the band prior to Little River Band. And it was pretty much always our opener when we used to tour, we would open with the a cappella vocals, and it was a great way to settle in. We did the long version on stage, and it was a great way to settle in for a concert.
Yeah, and it's a good way to get everybody's attention because you're like, hey, everybody, and people
Yeah,
are,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
smart songwriting. All right, let's skip around a little bit. So, what have you been up to? People probably want to know. It's been a while since all the old band was together, and
Yeah.
there's an American version of this band now that tours. And I've full disclosure, I've seen them perform in concert, and it was a good show. I'm not going to say it was a bad show, but um, obviously there's there's been a lot that's happened, and um, do you still are you still in contact with all of the original band members?
Yes, yes, we are because we've got a lot going on with our catalogue. We are in the process of remastering the whole catalogue. There'll be a brand new release of greatest hits. I'm sort of the go-to guy now for the band with the record company Universal, and that we have lots of plans for releases uh, and lots of possibilities for the future with. One day there might be a film, there might be, well, a musical, which I've been very keen to look at and have been, in fact, working on for the last 8 years. So there's a great potential with the LRB catalogue, the songs that everybody knows. But there's a lot of other songs, as you sort of alluded to there, that not many people know that that people would love if they knew about them. So we're going to possibly not only release the greatest hits, but we're going to possibly release a companion volume of some of the better tracks, some of the more interesting tracks that weren't singles, but I think will make a great release. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. When I got into the radio business, I kind of caught like maybe the second coming of your band at the time. You had recently signed with MCA Records, which I think is now owned by someone else, but at the time it's Universal. So is the stuff that you're going to come out with, is that unreleased material, or is it just stuff that's out of print? Because I have like this album here, I picked up
Lucky.
online, but obviously you can't buy it anywhere. People have old copies of it, and I was fortunate enough to find it because I really like that record. And I was on the radio playing a song, "It's Cold Out Tonight," from I think it was 1988,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
I my boss came in and said, we don't play that band on this station. And I said, look, it's a harder edge song for them because the station down the street had more of a soft rock, playlist. And I was really impressed with the vocal harmonies, and it was a good song for our format. And even the record label at the time, which didn't really do a whole lot of promotion for you guys, said to me, hey, thanks for playing that song. And I'll never forget that because they were just surprised that I added the track to the playlist.
Yeah, well, that's what happened when we signed with MCA. We didn't get the support that we had with Capitol Records for those first 5 or 6 albums. So without that support, America's a big country, and
Mm.
there's lots of songs, and there are many songs. I think we could have easily had another dozen or so top 10 records in America, but the tap got turned off. The financial support that we were enjoying in those heady years of the late 70s and early 80s. And once that tap gets turned off, there's really nothing you can do. Nothing you can do. We were releasing, we thought, very uh, songs with great potential. Could have been hits, a number of them,
Yeah.
but it just never got through the barriers that lack of money from the record companies creates.
Now, you guys had a string, though, which for a while, I don't know if the record still holds, but from, was it 1977 up until like 1982 or 83, where you guys had year after year, you had top tens?
We had 6 years in a row with a top 10 record. And at that time, I don't know if that's changed, but we had 6 years in a row, and we were the only act in the world that had ever achieved that at that time. And
Yeah.
that was probably 77, maybe 77, 78, 79, 80. No, it was 78 through to 82.
To
Yeah,
82. Yeah. And
yeah.
you guys, I think, just missed with the song "We Too." I think that was in the top 20, and it fell a little short. And that was like that began a
Well,
streak in the other
that,
direction.
that was the beginning of the end, and that's the a big turning point in our career. When we recorded We Two, we thought we've got our first number one. That's what we genuinely thought. And then the Capitol put it out, and in 5 weeks it was 22 with a bullet, and that was the fastest moving single that we had ever had on the American charts. And it was absolutely, we thought, 2 weeks away from being a top 10 record.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened, as destiny would come in and pull the rug from under you, is that the A&R guy that was a big LRB fan and had been there for all of the hit records and had the campaign and the money to help us with all the records. He left Capitol to go and work for, I think, the Chicago baseball team. What's the baseball team in Chicago? Sox
Cubs
or
or the White Sox?
That's it.
Yeah.
And he went to work for them. He was a big fan. So a new A&R guy comes in, and within 1 week said, "LRB's not a priority. I've got other acts that I want to spend on." And game over.
Yeah.
Game over. I think, in retrospect, I think that had we had Irving Azoff managing us, I don't think that would have happened, because I think he would have gone in there guns blazing. But we didn't have that power in our management to be able to say to them, because you see, we had the other guy, which was top 10. It was John Farnham singing this,
Yeah.
and we had a top 10 with the other guy, and we just needed a real big record with John Farnham out front,
Mm-hmm.
and we felt that that was going to be it. And because it didn't happen, and after about 2 weeks it had dropped out of the charts, and as I said, it was game over.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the end, and Capitol had lost interest, even though at that point we still had 2 albums to record for them, which was Playing to Win and then No Rains on Me, which they put zero promotion into, and there were fine potential top 10 records on both of those songs, both of those albums,
Yeah.
but it never got the exposure. So that ended the band. That We Too issue, that basically ended the band.
Wow, it's really interesting to hear the story from the person who was there and was in the middle of it all. Here's a question I wanted to ask you. What was it like working with Sir George Martin? That must have been something.
Well, it was something, but um, there were a few things. Firstly, George was getting towards well, not the end of his career, but he was he wasn't in the prime like he was when he was with the Beatles.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I had, because like I'm a real homebody, and we went to Montserrat, Air Studios in Montserrat, and it was 43 hours and 6 planes from Melbourne to get there. So it's like a two-day journey, and then there's no phone connections. You are completely isolated. And I had been touring for so many years, and I was missing home like anything. And I said to George that, George actually said to us, he said that he wouldn't work, he couldn't work any more than 9 hours a day on the recording, which left a lot of spare time with an empty studio there. And I understand that now. I'm a bit older myself, or I'm older now, and I understand how I can't work the 18-hour days or 20-hour days like I used to when I was young. So I understand it now. But I said to George, look, we're going to be here for 3 months if we can only work 9 hours a day. And so he graciously allowed me to work the 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. shift. So I worked with mainly Beeb and Wayne Nelson.
Hmm.
We worked overnight. So we would have we'd have breakfast, we'd have dinner together. That's with George, and then I would work with our engineer Ern Rose, Wayne and Beeb, and overnight, and record songs like The Night Owls and like Take It Easy on Me, which were my songs. And then in the day, George and Jeff Emmerich would work, the engineer, would work with David and Glenn
Hmm.
and the other musicians that we had, Derek, for instance, doing band tracks and overdubs and things like that. And so then we would have breakfast together and then dinner together and discuss, and then George would listen to what we were recorded overnight and then talk to us about it and da da da. But he left us to our own devices, and as a result of that, I was able to leave in about 3.5 weeks. I got all of my recording done,
Mm.
and then there were all these other overdubs that everyone else had to do for them, which they did with George, and so they stayed a lot longer than I did. But the wonderful thing with George was he was so gracious with the Beatles stories. Like when
Yeah.
we're having dinner, we've got the chef would cook the lovely meal each night, and we would all sit around, and we could just freely ask any questions of George uh, that we ever wanted to ask, and that was the highlight of one of the highlights of my life actually. And I remember a most incredible story. My favourite Beatles song was always "We Can Work It Out." That was my favourite Beatles song.
Mm.
And I asked George about that song, and he said he remembered it vividly. He said that there was one sort of afternoon in the studio, and Lennon and McCartney had like a bit of an argument or something about something, and they left without it being resolved, the argument. And so in the morning, uh, Paul comes in with, this is what George told me. Paul came in with this new song and sat on a stool and with his guitar and sang it to John, and it's try to see it my way. Only time will tell if I am right or I am wrong. If we see it your way, da da
Yeah.
da, about the argument. And he said he was standing in the studio and said, without batting an eye, Lennon picked up his guitar and just sang back to him, "Life is very short, but there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend." Like
Wow.
in the moment, in the moment, and without even saying anything. And so they just worked it out and recorded it that day. I mean, that's the genius that those guys were, and the competition, I guess, between Lennon and McCartney. And there were many stories like that he told us, because like you don't get that sort of stuff online or in interviews and things like that. You need to be, at a dinner table and say, what was that like? And he told us some stuff that it just is not in the press, and it's amazing. It's amazing, and they're just normal guys like us. We could relate to all of that because of that's the life that we lived too.
Right. Right. Now
Yeah,
you guys were it seemed like you're all kind of type A personalities in this group. I mean, everybody had a lot of talent. Everybody was singing, obviously. Everybody was writing, or it seemed that way. Um,
yeah,
did that competition cause some division within the group? Because again, I read things or I'd heard things that one of the statements that I read was that it was kind of a revolving door. This is what I was by the American media and some of the things I read. And one guy would leave and then he would come back and so forth. I don't know if it was because you guys didn't get along all that well or there was a lot of competition. I'm assuming everybody is good now these days with everything because of.
yeah.
Um,
Well, firstly, the revolving door is bullshit, to put it politely.
okay.
There's no revolving. There might be a revolving door with the US-based American band, but then with our band, I mean, it's a simple matter that, as far as I was concerned, there were only 13 members of Little River Band. That's it, not 60 or 70. We had a lot of side men.
Hmm.
Uh, the actual, what I would call band members, we started as a six-piece band with Glenn Shorrock, myself, Beeb Birtles and Derek Pellicci, and then we had Rick Formosa and Roger McLaughlin, who played It's a Long Way There, the first two albums. It's a Long Way There, and then After Hours, which were the first two albums. Then, before we came to America, Rick and Roger, that's the guitarist and bass player, were left, and George McArdle and David Briggs joined. So that therefore that's referred to as the classic lineup. Right. So that lineup then recorded, Help Us On Its Way, the Diamantina Cocktail album. It recorded Reminiscing on the Sleepercatcher album, and then George McArdle left after doing two albums. Yeah, that's right. That's the Sleepercatcher. George McArdle left, and we worked with a session player, a bass player, and one of the greatest bass players of all time, an Australian player called Barry Sullivan, toured with us, but he was not a member. He was a sideman, as was our piano player, Mal Logan. They were salary-paid musicians. So there were the five of us, and then it came to the time, I think it was 1980, where we offered Wayne Nelson the opportunity to join the band, and he replaced Barry Sullivan. And then it got to after Wayne joined, then we had, I think Stephen Housden would have joined just after that. Right. Then Glenn Shorrock left, and John Farnham replaced Glenn. And then once John Farnham came, we did one album with Derek and Beeb and John Farnham, and Derek and Beeb had left, and Derek was replaced by a drummer called Steve Presswich, who was in Cold Chisel in Australia. Beeb wasn't replaced at that time, but we added David Hirschfelder, who was a wonderful keyboard player and an award-winning, an Academy Award nominated composer on keyboards. And that's it. Yeah. Then we finished the Little River Band Capitol Agreement in 1986 after doing the 8 albums, and the band ceased. That was it, finished, done. And then about 17 months later, we were offered these to reform to do the 2 MCA albums. Right. And the band that reformed then was Glenn Shorrock, Derek Pellicci, myself, Wayne Nelson, and Stephen Housden.
So you were a constant throughout. You never left that group ever.
Never left, no.
Yeah. So it's tough for me to get into this too much because I know there's a lot going on behind the scenes. But so why do you think all of this stuff happened in the 1990s, for instance, when everybody kind of basically signed out and said, we're done? Maybe because of what happened with MCA, those 2 records weren't promoted all that well, but I think, like, I believe that they were 2 excellent albums, and the music industry changed radically moving into the 1990s. So it was I think if you had stuck together and kept going, I think you would have kind of been swimming against the tide for a while. But what happened with a lot of bands is they waited it out, or they got back together and started touring a lot, because the touring revenue obviously was more important than the streaming revenue, which you can't really make any money off of that. Even in those days, albums weren't selling as much. So a lot of these classic or older bands were getting back together again, or just focusing on touring. They might be recording a little bit just for their hardcore fans. But what was the issue in the 90s? Was it just because what happened after MCA is basically what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, well, firstly, with our band, we've got, like, I lived in Melbourne. You've got Glenn Shorrock, who lived in Sydney. Okay. And, of course, you've got Beeb, who lives in America. Yeah. You've got George McArdle lives in Queensland. Like, it's not like we can just ring each other up and get together for a jam. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. But the point is that without a recording contract, my motivation for being in the band just wasn't there. I never had any interest in playing the greatest hits circuit like the American band are doing at the moment. I've got too many other things and interesting things in my life that I want to pursue with my creative life. And one of them, of course, was a number of solo albums that I recorded, working with a whole bunch of musicians, with my own studio at home, and developing my musical abilities in a way that just endlessly touring, just playing the clubs or playing the greatest hits circuit, that doesn't do it for me, because it's
Right.
just, it's boring. I find it quite boring. Like if you've got a new record, like it was in the early days, where you would do a record and it was exciting. You would go out and you're doing radio interviews, but I'm not a hits and memories sort of guy. I'm more interested in what's the next thing and what is the next thing. So when it was obvious that the two MCA albums were not going to return us to any sort of exciting touring level in America at that time, I left. There's no point. There were no plans or even opportunities to record a new album, and I had many new songs that I wanted to record, and there was no point we're recording them with Little River Band because there was no market. So I firstly I formed a band called Broken Voices, which were all my songs, and then I went and did a number of solo albums, and on and on and on and on. So it's always about, to me, new creative things to explore.
Right, but the original guys, you guys have got together in Australia a few times to do live performances, though, correct?
Just the once. You're talking about Birtleshire at Goble in the early 2000s.
Yes. Well, I thought it was more than it was just a one-off performance.
No, we were there. We were together for 2 or 3 years, but that sort of story comes at the, if we're going to talk about the end of why it got to that, with
Okay.
with the loss of the name and things. You see, so
Yeah. Well, it was just good to see you guys. I'm sure you had a lot of fans who were excited, but one of the things that I often talk about on this program is the fact that branding is so key to your success and to getting people to show up for concerts. I mean, no offense to anybody's name in this group, and I've poked fun at several of the names in the band, but these aren't names that roll off the tongue.
no,
You know,
exactly.
it's the same as if the Eagles had to call themselves Henley, Fry, Schmidt, and Felder. That wouldn't be something that would roll off the tongue, and people would go, okay, where are the Eagles? And so I run into a lot of casual fans here in America. And in fact, the show I went to, obviously, there were a lot of people there who I know this probably really irritates you, probably didn't know that wasn't the original band. They have no idea. And this goes on quite a bit now, because you've got bands like the Guess Who. I think they have one original member. You've got Quiet Riot out there touring now with no original members. And you can find a number of bands that have said, okay, we're going to continue. You'll have a founding member. I think Blood, Sweat, and Tears has been doing that for 20 or 30 years, where they have one guy who owns everything. I think in this case, it's Stephen Housden, if I'm not mistaken, who kind of owns the rights to everything and says, yes, you have my blessing. I have the paperwork here. Go out and perform, and I will get my share of the revenue, whatever you guys make, and you can keep doing that. So, I mean, that must get under your skin a little bit, I would assume. And from what I've heard, there are a number of people in Australia, obviously, that really bothers.
Well, why wouldn't it? Because there are no original members in the All American lineup,
Right.
and and but it's not just the fact that that is the case. We have documented thousands of situations on the internet where their shows are advertised using our recordings, often our images, and the biography that they present on their website pretty much erases us from history when you read it, and also our album covers, of which they didn't play on at all for the most part,
Hmm.
are all displayed in amongst the re-recordings of our hits that they've re-recorded. So um, they if you were the casual inquirer and went on to the website, you would think, yes, well, that's just a continuation of the band, or that is the band today. But it couldn't be further from the truth from our perspective, because there are no original members, and the music that they play is not the music that we played. They're the same songs,
Hmm.
and they do their best, I think, to try and copy our arrangements or even rearrange them, as they try to do from time to time. But it's a very different experience to what it was standing in front of the real LR, I won't say the real LRB, but the Little River Band that I was part of,
Hmm.
uh, the band that broke our music in America. That was a whole different experience to what you get today. And of course, why would people know? Because the story is not known.
Hmm.
I mean, people don't bother to do internet searches and find out what the truth of it is. And
No.
so they trade on that, you see. So because they can legally call themselves Little River Band, then they just keep doing it. That's what,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a good. There's no real good way of you know dealing with this issue. There's nothing that I can say to you or to the people that are going to these shows and and look, I think, like I said, the average casual fan
Yeah.
who sees something in a newspaper or online, tickets on sale, you get notifications now all the time for everything. You sign up for something. Say you go to a venue, like we have this place called Barbara B. Mann Auditorium, which is where I saw that band, and they're returning again, and I got a notification that they're going to be there. Most people, they're just not going to know. It's just
They don't know.
they know what they hear on the radio, and they go, "I love that song, and I want to go see it."
Yeah, no, I understand that. It's they're playing the audience. They're earning a living off of the songs that we recorded and wrote and arranged, and we have built an audience around those songs,
Yeah.
um, and they just go out and play them. But the difference is there are no original members in that band, and they don't call themselves a tribute band. They call themselves Little River Band, and
Yeah.
in fact, even their website says the real Little River Band. I mean,
Oh,
that's pretty incredible to have that type of ego to claim that you are the real Little River Band, because it simply is stretching it a bit.
yeah. Well, I'm not going to argue. I mean, there's you're obviously in the right. They're gonna One of the arguments they throw back is that, well, they didn't read the contracts properly, and they all kind of just signed the contract, and so thus this is where we are now. I understand what they're saying. I understand that from a legal perspective, but I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary that Chicago the band did, where they
No, I
talk
never.
about their relationship with William Guercio, which is their original manager, producer, jack of all trades, and he was signing all the contracts and telling the boys, "Hey, I got you. Everything. I'm going to take care of everything for you." It's the typical guy in the song, like the Pink Floyd song "Have a Cigar." I've got this, and they came to find out later when they started to audit the books that millions, literally millions of dollars was gone. And they didn't, in the documentary, they didn't say specifically that Guercio had taken the money, but he had obviously written those contracts, and he did it in a way to take more of their income and to kind of write them out of certain things, and they had to fire him, redo all the contracts. I mean, you guys are busy creating music, right? I mean, you're a songwriter. You're busy songwriting. You're
Yeah,
hoping that your manager and the people up above that you that are going to handle the business end are going to do their job, and you're not going to have to worry, right?
Exactly. And we had a different experience than what you just described that Chicago had.
All right, so that's part one of my interview with Graeham Goble. Part two will be airing shortly, and part two is very interesting because Graeham will outline how the original band members lost the name of the band and what's currently going on. So it's some fairly exclusive stuff that you're not going to see anywhere else. So stay tuned for that video. It'll be airing in the next day or two.